Welcome into another episode of Cyberly. I'm your host, Blythe Burnley. On this show, we talk about B2B marketing, the attention economy, and how it all fits into the world of logistics. And today is a very special Hall of Fame edition show. We are talking a lot of different topics. And the first one we are going to talk about is how to market your company like a sports team. Then we're going to talk to Chelsea Kavanaugh. She is the Senior Director of Communications over at JAXPORT. And she's breaking down how exactly a city gets a port and then how the community benefits after getting that port. And then in the final topic, we are going to talk about the logistics of getting an NFL team. But first, before we dive into any of those topics, let's go ahead and pay our respects to the Moonair Group. They are a leading recruiting firm in the logistics and technology fields. Whether you're looking for a new job in the industry or you're looking to hire top-tier talent, the Moonair Group has a network strength to meet your needs. Learn more at moonairgroup.com. Also, if you're noticing a theme in today's show, it's very Jacksonville heavy because that's where I was born and raised. So Moonair Group is also a North Florida-based business, and we're going to be talking a lot about Jacksonville today. So whether you're a fan or not of the city of Jacksonville, hopefully you'll be able to come away with some cool little, nuggets to use it, a future trivia night or just a future, just whatever in conversation. But that first topic that I want to jump into is how to market your team, market your company like a sports team. Because I think for a lot of people, they think of B2B marketing as sort of boring, that there's nothing really going on, that is just, case studies and white papers, especially in logistics, especially in the B2B world. But with my background in freight and sports, I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about some ideas that I've seen, some campaigns being run in the sports arena that I believe that a lot of businesses can use to their advantage, especially in the logistics field, to help your marketing stand out from the rest that are just simply focusing on more of the boring parts of the industry. So let's talk about how to spice it up with tip number one, and that is to create an internal media team. So to give some perspective, years ago, especially over the course of just how sports has been covered and the evolution of how sports has been covered, there's always been a deep relationship building between journalists and some of the beat reporters and within the athletes and the team themselves. That relationship building was prioritized. But with the invention of social media, that has kind of just slowly started to disappear as far as the relationship building aspect is concerned. Nowadays, athletes can go straight to social media. They don't have to worry about using the team as their liaison to get their message out. They also don't have to worry about going directly to reporters and journalists in order to get their message out there, to get more media awareness, so that, maybe one day if they're getting a sponsorship deal or they are moving to another market, that they would still have a lot of the same sponsorship deals and a lot of the same deals that they have away from the football field or away from, wherever their field of choice is, that they would still have those opportunities. So they would use the journalists and the beat reporters in order to establish that marketing, that awareness. Now they can go straight to social media and they can control all of it. And so the lesson, I think, for a lot of different companies out there is to do the same thing, is to, when you're creating video and podcast content, it gives you control over the message. Because for a lot of times, a lot of players want to speak to a lot of different media and have more of those casual conversations. But a lot of times the players will get in trouble by having these conversations. So that's why the team likes to almost protect the player from themselves, but also to protect the team from anything that the player might get out there and say that wouldn't necessarily be sanctioned by the actual team media. So no longer do you have to pitch to a reporter and hope that they feature you in a story. You can actually take ownership of your own media, of your own content, and you can do it yourself and still tag them anyways. So if you own the content, you own the distribution, and then you can reap the rewards from that. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is kind of related, because the tip number two is to have a war room ready for big events. And when I say a war room ready, think about the bigger events, like the Super Bowl, for example. A lot of teams and a lot of brands that are advertising in the Super Bowl, they will have what's called their media war room, where it will literally be just people sitting around a desk, and you'll have one person that's recording the action. You'll have one person that has, scheduled, posts to go out on social media. You have another person that may be recording the action. You have another person that may be writing down the action of what's going on and live blogging it. These are a lot of the different components that make up a war room setting for a lot of these brands for bigger events like the Super Bowl. But you can actually take that tip and take that strategy and use it for things like conferences and events. Now, when you go to conferences, don't just write, or maybe what I see typically is people will take a few thoughts, they'll write them down in a notebook, and then they'll share it with their team whenever they get back into the office. But if you're going to a conference, you're going to a virtual event, you're going to maybe a local networking event, then maybe what you can do is you can take that extra initiative, and then you can take the initiative to take that content and then create a video from it, and then create that video from it, then that creates more long form content. So you have that original long form content, and then that will also give you the ability to move that conversation into social media clips, into email distribution, and just getting that consistent messaging out. So not only are you writing down all of the insight that you're learning from each of these different events, but then you are taking that information and you're sharing it with your audience. And so you become the authority, and you become the person that is being that liaison for that information. So when you go to conferences, have your own war room plan ready. Not only are you going to be taking notes, but maybe you can set up a situation where you take this information and you email it back to your team, and they're crafting up a response, they're crafting up a blog post, and they're creating the distribution for the content that you've already written down, that you've already, gathered from these industry experts. And then maybe you can have a sort of a roundtable discussion for whenever you get back, and you can film that reaction. You can film it with your cell phone, mic everybody up with a $20 microphone, and then you can have that long form content that feeds into social media, and then eventually feeds into your email distribution and just your overall marketing and brand awareness. So borrow from the other industries that are using, a war room style media department, or they're really creating like a media war room. So you can use that philosophy, and then you can apply it to your own business for those bigger events and for some of those different just big conferences that you're going to, where those ideas just aren't lost and they're not, just left to the winds. And, you discover them in a notebook years later when you could be sharing them and you could be using them to your advantage, more so than just sharing it with the executive leaders whenever you get back in town. Now, the tip number 3 that I want to give is to think outside the box. Sports and entertainment are where the most creative ideas are happening, which is why I was excited to really cover this topic, because you can use them as inspiration. You don't have to use your competitors or other colleagues within the industry as inspiration. You can go to other folks or other industries, and you can get your inspiration from there. And we often talk about the importance of, on this show, especially when it comes to marketing, we talk about the importance of customer research. And there was one instance where the Savannah Bananas, yes, it's a minor league baseball team out of Savannah, Georgia, but they watched what their customers did, not what they said. Let's play that clip.
A lot of people believe in surveying their customers. I struggle with it. Henry Ford never surveyed his people and said, what do you want? Because the joke is they would have said faster horses. Steve Jobs was completely against surveying. Same thing with Amazon. So I'm more intrigued about watching our fans and then thinking about what's a better experience. So we take pictures of our grandstand every 30 minutes. We keep track of when fans leave. Not necessarily when they come in, but when they leave. And so by watching this for many years, even with every game sold out and a wait list in the thousands, fans were still leaving games early because it was too long. And so we realized that 9 o'clock was that right time in a 2-hour game. And so we started testing it, and we did an experiment in 2018 with colleges. We played a 9-inning game in 99 minutes, which was outstanding. We had a lot of failures along the way, a lot of parts of the rules that just didn't make sense and we had to get better at. But now 98% of our fans stay till the end of the game.
Incredible story, right? They actually watch and they photograph what their fans are doing, so they can take that market research instead of just surveying fans, which I still think that you should survey fans in a one-to-one environment and still have those conversations, especially, in the B2B world, where if a prospect reaches out to you and wants to do business with you, asking them, how did you hear about us? Or, different solutions or what they think about different products that you might be bringing to market. I still think that that's incredibly valuable and incredibly insightful, but they took it one step further and they surveyed their fans within the actual audience, which I think is brilliant, because if you've seen some of those uniforms and are very recognizable because their videos and their routines to get people to stay until the end of the game, that has gone viral. And now other teams are thinking about using those same initiatives. And I think that there's a lot of parallels between what the Savannah Bananas are doing and really where, a lot of different industries and a lot of different companies can take inspiration from. Now, for the last tip that I want to give you is to make your customers feel special. The first instance that I want to give is season ticket holders in sports. They are largely regarded as your holy grail of customers. And so when you have that holy grail of just dedicated fans, you want to make sure that you are keeping them happy. And the ways that a lot of different sports teams do this is by handling with their or coupling it with their season ticket packages. And so those season ticket packages usually arrive in the mail. They're typically arriving around this time of the year. If the team hasn't gone fully digital, which I'm not the biggest fan of teams going fully digital for all of their ticketing. I understand why they're doing it. I'm just not a fan. I love keeping my ticket stubs. I've kept them for years, and a digital ticket just isn't the same. But when you still, in the absence of getting the excitement of getting your envelope every year with your season tickets in it, some of these other teams have come up with a creative way to still create that excitement. And the first one I want to show you is this Bills example. Let's play that video. Or it's actually not a video, it's actually a clip. So what you're looking at is a lunch pail. This is a lunch pail that's Buffalo Bills branded. And inside each one of these actually came with a t-shirt and a couple of other Buffalo Bill goodies. So this was handed out to all of the different season ticket holders that arrived to a special season ticket holder only event. So creating those special events specifically for people who are already your customers. A lot of times what happens is that all the new customers get the cool deals and get the better deals than what the longtime customers get. And that's kind of unfair. And so for the Bills to take that extra step in order to, give Bills fans, sort of a something that they can carry around with them, and then be able to have other people be like, where'd you get that from? I want something like that. When I saw this photo, I wish that the Jaguars did the same thing for me. I've been a season ticket holder for more than 20 years, and I've never gotten something cool like that. So that instantly made me jealous. And speaking of making me jealous, there's another video that I want to play that's actually from the Raiders. And I think it's from this year, what the season ticket holders get. And if you're listening to this, what it is essentially a Raiders branded box, and you open it up and it has the dates on each of the tickets. And so they actually still give them printed tickets. And so the box is it's beautiful. It's beautifully lit. It shows, I think it shows all of their different years that they've won the Super Bowl, if I'm looking at this correctly. And then you get the package of the actual tickets themselves. So the box itself is probably a collectible. It's probably something that you can keep for a very long time, but it's also the presentation value of it, that you're not just sending customers, a packet envelope of all of the different tickets, but you're creating something special that they will keep with them probably for a very long period of time. Now, there's another example of this in the corporate world, which is corporate boxing, or the corporate box gifts. And let's go ahead and show the box idea number 1 and number 2 that's on the screen right now. And these are from Shopbox Fox. So they specialize in making custom boxes and also making the boxes that are ready to buy right now, because a lot of the boxes that you're seeing, they're kind of like a drink kit or a company branded, marketing messages and things like that. Basically, it's an entire marketing branded gift box, but you're sending it out to either, special customers and, maybe other, VIP employees that are within the company. So you're using these custom gift boxes in order to send out to the masses. Now, they also have another option where you can just buy immediately boxes that are already kind of pre-made. So it kind of helps out the marketing managers out there that maybe you didn't have enough time to order the big custom branded boxes, but you can still go out and you can still get the special boxes, because those are especially clutch when it comes to virtual events. If a virtual event that I sign up for sends me a box, I am much more likely to participate in that virtual event because there's a community built around it. Six River Systems is a great example of this, that you register for one of their conferences, they will mail you a box full of goodies. And a lot of times in that box, it's a drink making kit. So everybody who is at the virtual conference is then taking part in, say, a wine sipping, or a drink sipping or a drink making. They have a bartender that they've hired, to give the presentation on how to make a proper, old fashioned or something like that. Those are really creative ways to bring together a virtual community into the space that you're trying to promote that event. So another great idea. So it also makes you much more likely to tune into the event, if we're being honest. So all of those are really good tips in order to sort of think outside of the box. I think that we especially in logistics, especially in B2B marketing, we tend to not think outside the box. So I would suggest to all of the marketers out there, if you're feeling like your marketing is a little stale, if you're feeling like a lot of your pitches are, just boring to you, then they're probably going to be boring to your audience as well. So look to these other industries in order to get some inspiration. And hopefully, a lot of these ideas helped you as well. All right. It looks like we have Chelsea Kavanaugh ready to go. She's the Senior Director of Communications over at JAXPORT. So let's go ahead and bring Chelsea into the show.
Hey, Blythe. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, for folks who may not be familiar with JAXPORT, can you kind of give us a little bit of insight onto how you joined the company and how you started working in logistics?
Well, I joined JAXPORT in 2014 in the communications department, and I have a background in television news. So prior to that, I worked at Action News, which is a local CBS and Fox affiliate here in Jacksonville. So kind of telling the stories of the community from the news perspective and telling the stories of, the different neighborhoods here in Jacksonville. And so that kind of made a natural transition to my role here at JAXPORT, where I work to tell the story of our city's seaport. There are a lot of times we hear people say, well, I don't know a lot about the port because, most operations are done kind of behind secure gates for, of course, security reasons. But there are a lot of really exciting stories to tell about the people who help us keep cargo moving. So
I love that because, speaking of JAXPORT, because it's something that, I'm a lifelong Jacksonville resident. It's a, driving by the port on the way to the airport is something that, I've done all my life, but I've never really known the history of the port. How does a city get a port? What decision-making process goes into that?
Well, it's really interesting that, Jacksonville, we're known for a lot of things, but we really do have a rich maritime history. Jacksonville is really the nation's oldest port. Trade activity in our region dates back to the 1500s. But more recently, we were founded in 1963. And so, there was, of course, politics is involved in a lot of things, but that was how we were founded, is through a special act by the Florida legislature. But before 1963, the city operated the seaport kind of how they operate other things like parks and other city services. But I think what happened was they realized that, to operate a port and to really do it right and take advantage of all the benefits that come with having a port, you need to have its own agency. An agency needs to take care of all the things. There's a lot of cranes and a lot of work that goes into the equipment and the facilities that it takes to keep maritime trade running. And so that was how we started in 1963 with that special act from the legislature. A few years after that, they actually added the airport. And so we were Jacksonville Port Authority, known as the seaport and the airport. Since then, in the early 2000s, we split from the airport, and now we're just the seaport because, the businesses are very different.
So that's super interesting that the airport was tied to it as well, because my next question was going to be, well, after the port, I guess, is, officially comes to fruition in the 60s, what happens after that? Are you recruiting other ship lines to come to town? Are you building warehouses? What does that process, I guess, that grand, eagle eye view look like after the port officially arrives?
Well, so there's two really types of seaports. There's operating ports and there's landlord ports. So operating ports are the ones who actually move the cargo. They lift the containers off of the ships and move them around. We're the other kind of port, which is a landlord port. So we actually lease the space that is used by private businesses who actually conduct the movement of cargo. So people sometimes think it's interesting. I work at a port, but we actually don't own any shipping containers. None of our employees don't actually move any of the cargo. The people who are moving the cargo, they're either the labor unions who have been hired by the private businesses or the private businesses themselves who move the cargo. So we're I compare it to, like a shopping mall, and we rent out the space and we maintain it. But the private businesses actually run their individual operations. But I know that you talk a lot about marketing on this show, and that's really our role. In addition to maintaining the facilities, we really work to market Jacksonville as a leader in global trade. And we really work to promote the advantages that we have. Jacksonville has fast access to 98 million US consumers within one day's drive. We have outstanding labor, rail connections. So we just work to kind of really spread that message to the industry.
I mean, clearly that messaging is working because we've all heard the horror stories, about the port congestion on the West Coast and how it seemingly is never ending. How has that port congestion affected? Because I understand it's positively affected all of the ports on the East Coast, including JAXPORT.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we've kind of maintained uncongested operations throughout the supply chain disruption, which really is a testament to all of the men and women that are out on the docks every day, keeping cargo moving. But it's interesting when we look at the West Coast and kind of the things that are happening out there. Our goal really is it's not to attract cargo that is bound for California or Arizona. We are looking for cargo that is Southeast US bound cargo that really makes sense to come through Jacksonville and take advantage of all of our efficiencies. We have added 3 container services in the last 18 months. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was here twice in the last year, really helping us spread that message that Florida ports are open for business. And we offer a number of efficiencies. We don't have the labor disruption. And, we can keep the cargo moving. We have here in Jacksonville open berth availability 7 days a week. And as you said, the customers are really responding to that. And we are seeing very high level of interest here in Jacksonville.
That's awesome because I wouldn't have even thought like you want to prioritize the freight that's actually bound for the Southeast anyways. So why not just go ahead and optimize it and bring those ships over here to begin with instead of waiting out, for who knows how long. Now, another area of assumption for me, which I really feel like a fool kind of assuming this, but I just assumed that the cruise terminal of the port was just a separate entity altogether. And it kind of sounds like it's one of those, I guess, to use a phrase that you just use, a mall tenant of JAXPORT. How does the 3 different terminals, because from what I understand, you said it owns, maintains, and markets 3 cargo terminals, 2 intermodal rail terminals, and 1 passenger cruise terminal along the St. Johns River. And so you have 3 main terminals handle every type of general and project cargo. Are all of those operations sort of working together, like sort of like a sister company? How does that relationship sort of facilitate and grow? Are they growing together or are they growing independently, but also kind of together?
Absolutely. Yes. They're definitely growing together. I kind of look at it as pieces of the logistics puzzle. So we have 3 cargo terminals that are very different and they offer different capabilities. There's kind of a saying in the maritime industry that if you've seen one port, you've seen one port. And I think that's very true here in Jacksonville. Of course, all of our terminals are different and they operate differently, but we have ships that, may call one terminal one week and another terminal another week. So it really just depends on what their needs are. And it may even depend on what their needs are for that specific call. But we do have, roughly 1,500 ships that call our port each year. And we move about 10 million tons of cargo annually. So each of those terminals do stay very busy. We are one of the nation's most diversified ports. That's something that we're very proud of. So we move a lot of different cargo types. Containers and autos are the 2 biggest that we move, but we also move military equipment. A lot of people may not realize that we are one of the nation's 17 strategic seaports. We are the only port in Florida that moves military cargo for things like national defense and foreign humanitarian aid.
Oh, wow.
That's
That's
an
pretty
important
cool.
role.
Yeah, I mean, with the Mayport base here for folks who are unaware, Mayport Naval Base, and then we also have Kings Bay that's up in South Georgia. So very important military strategic point here in North Florida. And one of the things that I'm also a big fan of is the little boats. I feel like the little boats don't get enough love. And you guys had, a post the other day that talked about one of the historical tugboats that you explain it. Break us down what we're looking at on the screen.
Well, I'm so glad that you talked about the tugs because the big ships they get all the attention, but yeah, sometimes we do get to move some cool cargo through the port. And this was a piece of a tugboat that actually is from World War II. It was involved in the Normandy mission over there, but it was made in Florida and it went overseas. And so this is a homecoming that we were able to facilitate. And it was kind of cool. What you just saw there was a modern tug kind of tugging this older out of commission tug to where it was going. But it's ultimately going to DeLand, Florida, where it will be a museum for maritime tugs and people who have served on those as well. So it'll be a really nice museum, but it was really great to see it come in. One thing that was cool about this move in particular was it was a small nonprofit who was moving it through, and they really leaned on the expertise of our sales team. So we have we have cargo experts who specialize. I mentioned that we're one of the nation's most diversified ports. And we also have cargo experts who specialize in the movement of various kinds of cargo. So whatever you have coming through, whether it's a container or whether it's something like a historic World War II tug, we have somebody who can help manage it.
I love that. I love the little boats need love too. And one of the other stories of JAXPORT, I feel like this story has been, sort of a constant for me, is harbor deepening. You heard years and years about how we have to get the approval for harbor deepening, and then when it actually started and getting all the funding, and now that's actually been completed. Can you break down the significance of why a harbor needs to be deepened to begin with, and then what happens now that the harbor has actually been deepened?
Well, yeah. So harbor deepening, it's really a monumental moment for us to see this project come to fruition. Has really been it's been amazing, to be honest. The studies for the project began back in 2004, which I think is very interesting because that was about the same time that Amazon Prime launched. And when you look at how consumer spending habits have changed, we talk about cargo shifting from the West Coast. Well, cargo needs to now be at your doorstep 2 days after you order it, right? Which means distribution centers are moving closer to population centers. We have 1,000 people moving to Florida every single day. And so Jacksonville is located, we're at the northern gateway of the state. A deeper harbor allows us to accommodate not only bigger ships, but also ships of all sizes. We have Sealead, for example. They recently added us to their first ever East Coast container service, the Asia East Coast service, AEC service. And, their ships require a deeper draft. And so it's not just about the mega ships, but it's allowing Jacksonville to accommodate ships of all sizes so that we can bring more cargo and more jobs to Jacksonville. The harbor deepening project, it's not something that's going to provide just a short-term gain for this community. This is 40, 50 years down the road. This is really long-term benefits, supply chain security, and jobs for Jacksonville.
And so what happens, I guess, after the harbor is deepened? We're kind of already in it right now, but does that necessarily need to be done regularly? Is maintenance need to be done regularly in order to make sure that it's deep enough? How does that process work?
So regardless of the channel depth, the Army Corps of Engineers maintains whatever's established for that particular channel. So there would be the same amount of maintenance when we were at 40 feet. We were at 40 feet. We deepened to 47. So there is just that maintenance to keep it at whatever the established depth is. So there's no appreciable difference between, maintaining the 47 feet or maintaining the 40 feet.
So there's not a chance. I was thinking, well, maybe with all the ships flowing in and out, that's going to, maybe dust up some, sand at the bottom or something. And then maybe what if it gets to the point where it's not deep enough? That was my main concern, is that, this is probably something that they have to constantly maintain and monitor in order to make sure that, that a giant cargo ship doesn't get stuck on, coasting across the bridge or something like that.
Yes,
All
and
right,
the federal government does a job of helping maintain that harbor depth for every federal channel.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the community impact of when a city gets a port. So it's been around since the 60s. What kind of, I guess, community efforts does JAXPORT really, sort of prioritize, and how has that evolved over the years?
So, the biggest change for a community really is, of course, the economic impact that we see. And in terms of jobs, we're seeing a tremendous growth of industrial real estate. Every time I drive between our office, which is located near downtown, and our Blunt Island, which is our largest marine terminal, one of our largest marine terminals, we see new warehousing popping up all the time. And so it's really incredible to kind of see that logistics network continue to grow and thrive. I love talking about port growth with the service providers and the warehousing and some of the people who are involved in that network, because sometimes they are even able to capture how important the port is, better than I can most times, because it really impacts their bottom line and their business. So it's really interesting to talk to those folks and to hear their stories about how port growth impacts them. But we do have a lot of programs that we're working on in the environmental space as well. We recently launched our Connected St. Johns River Educational Program. It's a partnership with Jacksonville University, and it brings free river education and resources to area schools. I encourage anybody listening to check it out. It's at ju.edu/connected. There's all kinds of free resources. So if you're not local, you can use the resources that are online. If you are local, you can actually request to have a river expert come to your school or your community group. They do it, it's free. And it's just a great service that we're doing to really help spread the message about the importance of protecting the river, because, like, as you know, as somebody who lives in Jacksonville, the river is critically important to our economy, but it's also, of course, important to our recreation and our quality of life. So it's something that, we feel strongly about, and helping to spread that message and connect people with something that, can help spread our message.
I love that. So what kind of stuff so if I'm a school and I'm a teacher and I want somebody from this group from JU in order to come out and talk about the importance of the river, what kind of things would I learn? Is there, opportunity to go out into the field, or is it more, in the classroom education based? Can you kind of expand on that a little?
Yeah, so they've done all kinds of things, which I think is really neat. They do hands-on. They have something called an Enviroscape, which is a 3D model, and it actually shows you a lot of the challenges that are impacting the river and how personal choices, such as using too much fertilizer, you can actually see in person how using too much fertilizer gets down into the water supply and how it impacts ultimately the river. So they have a lot of really neat tools that they use that they can do in person. I think they have done some virtual during COVID, but it's mostly in person. I think there are also opportunities to come out and do visits to JU as well, but they do offer a number of of options depending on kind of what the need is. So I definitely encourage any area schools to check out that website and get connected with us.
Yeah, it sounds super cool, especially if you can get out in the field and see things with your own two eyes on how, different things affects the river. And because Jacksonville is so unique in that regard, because for a lot of folks who don't know, like the Mississippi River is a major logistics channel for the United States. And I'm just thinking outside of the box here, but with all of the freight coming in through the intercoastal, how important is the St. Johns River here in Jacksonville? How important is that to the intercoastal, and do they kind of work seamlessly together? I'm not even sure if you know the answer to that, but I'm just sort of thinking that how important is the river to the intercoastal and then to JAXPORT together?
I think our message is that it's all connected. And so where we kind of started with the connected name was that JAXPORT and JU are across the river. And so we are physically connected by the river. But as we were talking with the river experts and the team over at JU, we realized, the whole community really is connected. I mean, you said it right there. The river is vitally important to everything here in Jacksonville. And it's something that makes us really special. Seeing the river in person, every time I see a ship sail up the river, I've worked here since 2014, and it's still impressive to me, and I still enjoy it. But we don't take for granted the fact that we can't have a thriving seaport without a healthy river. The two go hand in hand. And so the St. John's is vitally important, and that's why it is very important to us to protect it. We also, Jacksonville is a world leader. You may know this because you live here. We are a world leader in the use of liquefied natural gas as a clean marine fuel. We also operate eco-friendly cranes. So there's a lot of things that are happening here at JAXPORT to make port operations cleaner and greener for the betterment of our community.
Love that. Great insight. So what other kind of, so we have those three different terminals. You're taking advantage of the river, you're taking advantage of the intercoastal system. What about the freight that moves through the city of Jacksonville or through JAXPORT? Where is that? I guess the most commodities that are being shipped here. Where does that freight go once it arrives? Tell us a little bit about the flow of freight once it actually arrives in JAXPORT.
So a lot of the goods that come in stay right here in Northeast Florida in the region. So we estimate that somewhere between 70-80% of the goods stay in the region, but it also goes throughout the Southeast as well. We see a lot of consumer goods, pretty much everything that you would see at a big box store, comes through our port, as well as, we are the number one port for trade with Puerto Rico as well. So we have a lot of trade going back and forth with the island of Puerto Rico as well.
And so one of the other bigger stories over the last couple of years has been semiconductor chips, and because they're so vitally important with the really how all of our society functions. I mean, we wouldn't be able to do this interview right now without having some kind of a computer chip in our devices in order to communicate that. And another big proponent or a big advantage for using the chips is also auto transport, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the number one cargo that moves through JAXPORT? Am I mistaken in that, or how is that? I guess the semiconductor chip affected the auto commodities that are coming through JAXPORT. Hopefully, I said that right.
Yeah, close enough. So yeah, we are we're the nation's number one, or we're Florida's largest container port, and we are one of the nation's top vehicle handling ports. So containers are the largest chunk of our business, but autos is second. So it is a very important part of our diversification. But we, of course, you never want to see volumes decline, but there are some declines with this auto part shortages that we're seeing. But we're actually using this as a time to grow. So it's like when volumes are down, grow a little bit. And so we reached a partnership with a public-private partnership with Southeast Toyota Distributors recently. They are actually going to relocate and expand their facilities from our Talleyrand terminal over to Blunt Island. And so they are going to grow there. That agreement protects 800 jobs. And Toyota has been a really great partner of ours, and they've done a lot to diversify their supplier base, which helps ensure that we continue to bring vehicles in through Jacksonville. And, we are expecting that there is a bit of a pent up demand, because globally supply is down a little bit. And so all of the growth that we're doing ensures that we are ready to meet the needs when that pent up demand and when the auto industry rebounds, we'll be ready. And
100%.
stronger than ever.
I know. Yeah, because several people I know are just waiting to buy it. They want to buy a car, but they're just waiting to buy it until the timing sort of works out in their favor. And another one of the commodities that I wanted to bring to light, which I thought was super fun and super fascinating, is that in one of JAXPORT's social media posts, it said last year JAXPORT is one of Florida's top seaports for shipments of water sport boards, moving approximately 50,000 surfboards and body boards, a 52% increase over the previous year. Do you have any other sort of fun, cargo related facts to share with us?
I do, but first, shameless plug for our social media. If you like Port Facts, please feel free to share or join us on social media. We are on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram at JAXPORT, or some version of that handle on each channel. We also have a YouTube channel. But we love to crunch the numbers. Most of the statistics that we get are in weight. So we weigh, the stuff that comes in. And so then we kind of play with the numbers and figure out what it equals. But we figured out that, Northeast Florida is home to the Players Championship. So we wanted to see during the Players Week, how many golf balls move through Jacksonville, because that is one commodity that we move. And we figured out that 1.8 million golf balls moved through JAXPORT last year. So that's enough to play roughly about, we figured 600,000 rounds of golf, maybe a little bit more if you hang on to your ball. In case my husband is listening, more than 2,300 tons of flowers moved through last year. So that's a lot of happy sweethearts. I always appreciate flowers. Last year we moved 9,000 containers filled with toys. So my kids would love that. If it was up to them, our house would be filled with them. So that's about 6.5 times as tall as Mount Everest, the amount of containers filled with toys that we did last year. Yeah. So we help, but we try to help out where we can.
That's awesome. I love those factoids, because that's another thing I think not a lot of people know, is that PGA headquarters is also in North Florida, as well as, home to the Players Championship, which is one of, it should arguably be the fifth major. In my eyes, it's the fifth major anyways. Now, you had mentioned your husband, who is actually an employee of the Jaguars, longtime employee of the Jaguars. I believe he's in charge of the video department. And if anybody has ever watched any Jaguar related videos, especially in game, I'm not just saying this because you're on the show, but hands down, best video team in the entire NFL. I will go to war for that statement. So tell us a little bit about your trip to Canton, because Jaguars are getting their first Hall of Fame player nominated, inducted into the Hall of Fame this week. And you and your husband are actually headed up there tomorrow. Tell us a little bit about your trip and anything that you're looking forward to doing and attending.
Yes, Big Bo. It's finally his time, right? We can't believe it. It's been a really long time coming. My husband, actually, as you mentioned, he is works with the production team, and he's been in the room every time when they have the moment where they either call Tony or they knock on the door to say, if you get the knock, you made it. If you get the call, you didn't make it. And so, the production team is in there because they want to interview him and all of that. And he's always been there when Tony got the call saying you didn't make it. And so he's really excited. We're really excited. My husband's actually already up there because they have their preseason game tonight. I'll be flying up tomorrow, but we're really excited. Especially in the last few years, there's been so few moments to celebrate as a Jaguars fan, especially we think about last year. So it's just a really exciting time to just come together, with all the fellow Jags fans and just really have a moment of excitement. Tony is, my husband just tells me that he's, such a great guy, and he's known him for a very long time because he's been with the Jaguars for 10 years. And, he just tells me if anybody deserves it, it's Tony. So we're really excited to celebrate and just be a part of Jaguars history, and just, it really feels surreal. But I do want to mention that one thing that my husband has been working on, his team has been working on for the last year, is a documentary on Tony's, the journey to the Hall of Fame. And even if you're not a Jaguars fan, I highly recommend, if you're interested in football and hearing, the highs and lows of kind of a journey like that, I definitely recommend checking it out. It'll be out on Jaguars.com in the fall. I think in October it'll come out.
I love that. And I loved echoing that statement because you're right. It has been, the cheering moments have been few and far between the last few years in a variety of different ways. But it feels good to finally have, a little bit of hope going into the season that's coming up. And then also to be able to celebrate, sort of a lifelong fandom of the, just the Jaguars being in Jacksonville and finally getting the accolades that I think a lot of this fan base and a lot of these players who have poured, their blood, sweat, and tears into this organization. So I echo that statement. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Where can folks follow more of your work? Where can they follow JAXPORT? All of that good stuff. Because you said it, you have great social media. So where can folks follow it?
Yes, we are on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And, we really try to share the stories that as much as we can of the port community. So please check us out. JAXPORT.com is the website. It talks about all of the different commodities that move through. So if you're ever just kind of curious about what's going on at JAXPORT, check out JAXPORT.com or our social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chelsea. Have fun up in Canton, and we will look forward to that documentary coming out in October. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So what a great, fun conversation. I mean, especially hearing from the fact of Chelsea's husband and working for the Jaguars and the significance of not just, JAXPORT to the community, but also the Jaguars as well. And so right before I jump into that topic, let's go ahead and talk about Moon Air Group, because it's another North Florida business that is making some great impacts here on the First Coast and really across the entire nation as far as your recruiting efforts are concerned. So want to boost your bottom line? Start with hiring the right talent. The Moon Air Group is a leading recruiting firm that specializes in identifying the top logistics and technology talent. Take the first step towards growing your business by visiting moonairgroup.com. And now for our final topic, and one that I spent literally all week prepping for, watching historical videos on this process, because I want to talk about the logistics of getting a football team. And for me, I was 9 years old when we got the Jaguars. And so I know, I have a pretty good memory of what happened after the city was awarded the team, but how it happened to get the football team to begin with was something that I wanted to talk about today, because it was one that I think, a lot of different decisions went into this. A lot of different chess pieces were involved in this process. And it's really a sort of a fascinating deep dive into what it takes to get an NFL team to a city. Because especially for, a small market like Jacksonville, you have a group of people that have spent decades trying to get a team to town. A lot of people think it was a fly-by-night decision by the NFL in order to award an NFL team to the city of Jacksonville. What it was not. It was years and years of relationship building between a particular group within the Jacksonville community. And it took a lot of, inferiority complexes, feeling like the NFL is absolutely going to say no to us. Also dealing with outsiders telling you, trying to reaffirm those same fears that you have about yourself. But then also, having that confidence to say, no, we actually can do this because we have a history of doing it. And so let's talk about what that process looks like, because you can't just call up the NFL and say, hey, I want a team, because otherwise every city in the country would be doing that and likely probably has tried at some point. So as a city, you almost have to, and this is based on the video that I was watching, it's called Destiny. It's about the Jacksonville Jaguars and how the city landed the team. It's over on YouTube. I have it linked in the show notes. It's it's about an hour-long documentary about that process. And so a lot of these video clips that you're going to see today come from that. And if we set sort of the ground level was really about Mayor Jake Godbold. He was the facilitator. He had this grand grand vision of bringing a team to Jacksonville. And so you kind of have to have this come to Jesus moment where you say, okay, well, where do I want to go? Where do I want to take this city? But also, where have we been? So back in the late 70s and the early 80s, Jax was really looking for an identity. There were no pro sports team, but we did host the Gator Bowl. We have hosted the Gator Bowl, which is the annual matchup between the Florida Gators and the Georgia Bulldogs. So we've hosted that game every year since 1933, almost every year since 1933. There were a couple of years in there as, the stadium is getting, redeveloped, or, a new stadium is being constructed. Those were the few years that we did not host the Florida-Georgia game. But we also had a USFL stint in 1984, where briefly the USFL was a thing in the United States. Not anymore, but we did have a USFL team. So that was really laying the ground level in order to be able to say, hey, we have a football culture here in town. We're ready for that next step of getting an NFL team here. So then the city of Jacksonville, what they started doing is they started flirting with other teams. One of those teams, Baltimore, now the Indianapolis Colts, they were once the Baltimore Colts. In 1979, 50,000 Jax residents showed up to the Gator Bowl to greet Bob Irsay, who was considering leaving Baltimore. So Jaguars were old, or that Jacksonville was actively flirting with other teams to try to get them to bring their team to our city. Bob Irsay actually famously landed a helicopter in the middle of the once Gator Bowl, where all of those 50,000 fans were at, which is really sort of interesting to see fans holding up signs that saying Jax wants the Colts, which is now, present day a division rival of the Jaguars, but they once tried to steal away the Baltimore Colts. The Colts would, of course, pack up in the middle of the night and controversially leave to go over to Indianapolis. Ultimately, that is where they have been ever since. There is another team that we tried to woo away, and a lot of the Titans fans don't know this, but Jax also tried to woo away the Houston Oilers. The Houston Oilers would eventually move to Nashville and become the Tennessee Titans, and eventually become the arch rival of the Jaguars. There are a lot of FreightWaves production staff that are hating the show today because they are all located in Tennessee. And so they are not Jaguars fans. They are Jaguars haters, but not as much, I think, as Jaguars hate Titans fans. I think it's kind of one-sided with how many Jaguars fans actively hate the Titans fans. And we're not going to go into those reasons today because I would need like 2 hours in order to discuss that topic. As the production team is actually buzzing in my ear saying a go Titans. But I think it's also kind of ironic that the Jacksonville spent so long trying to get, or spent years flirting with other cities to get them to bring their team here. And then now present day, the past, I would say probably 10 to 15 years, other cities have actively tried to pull the Jaguars away, looking at you, LA and London. So no, Jaguars aren't going anywhere. Let's fingers crossed. But ultimately, in this particular situation, Jake Godbold and his team were doing was about building relationships, because all of that I just told you happened in the late 70s and 80s. And so in 1991, the NFL decided to add 2 teams to the current 28 team list, bringing the total to 30 teams. So 5 cities were invited to participate in the expansion of the NFL. So it was Baltimore, Carolina, Jacksonville, Memphis, and St. Louis. And so what happens next is that the city of Jacksonville forms an official group. So they have to form this official group called Touchdown Jax in order to be the liaison to bring that team and set up all of the negotiations that has to happen from, the ultimate decision of, hey, we're going to give you a shot from the NFL in order to making that, dream come to fruition. So the requirements from the NFL in order to get a team is that the NFL wants to deal with one person. They want one representative. They don't want to deal with a group. So even Touchdown Jax was formed. They don't want to deal with an entire group. One owner that comes to the owners' meetings, and that's who they want to deal with. That is the ultimate sort of point of contact. So you have to have one point of contact. And then they would also be an owner that the league accepted. So you can't just nominate anyone. You have to nominate somebody that's going to be the owner of the team, be the liaison, but then also be an owner that the other owners would accept into their club, into their exclusive club. Then the other requirement that you had to do was a first class or new facilities agreement in place. So you either had to have a brand new stadium or you had to have an agreement with the city and the taxpayers in order to fund a brand new city. Then you also had to pre-sell club seats so that the community would show support. And so if you're looking on the screen right now, there's a sign that says get your NFL club seats on July 1st. Your grandchildren will thank you. And so now that the requirements are already listed, that's when the real work begins. And so what happened is that you had to negotiate between the city council and the city itself in order to replace the Gator Bowl. That was, very, sort of not underfunded, but it wasn't a first-class facility that the NFL wanted. So if you ever watched any of these sort of lease renewals or, stadiums and other sports trying to get a new stadium, you know that those discussions can get a little ugly. And the stadium pricing started out at $50 million, but the price kept rising because of all of the other teams that were in the mix. All the other 4 teams you're essentially competing with. And so if they're going to make a $100 million stadium, then you have to make a $120 million stadium. So the prices started to get crazy, and you can probably imagine how annoyed, the non-football fans became, especially the ones on the city council, which is an interesting note because Touchdown Jacks knew about this annoyance, but instead they switched their pitch to saying, okay, let's look at it as you were already going to spend $50 million on stadium renovations on the current stadium, but the NFL is going to give you an NFL team and you get a brand new stadium for $120 million, which I know it's a lot of money, but if you think about it from that lens, that's the way the Touchdown Jacks pitched it. So I thought that was interesting. The next thing that they had to do, so once they came to that agreement with the city council and the stadium financing, the next would be to pre-sell those 10,000 club seats in 10 days. Jacksonville had to do that. So the team went to the local news stations. They held a ticket drive. They went to large corporations in order to get them to commit to, 500 tickets, 250 tickets. Sort of an interesting note here is that with a lot of these companies, they didn't think that Jacksonville had a chance either to get the team. And so they just said, yeah, we'll get, put us down for 500, not thinking that the team would actually come to Jacksonville. So there was a lot of, Wayne Weaver says, a lot of tight collars after the approval was finally given. So I thought that was also an interesting note about the ticket sale process. But they ended up hitting that goal, and then they actually not extended the goal, but exceeded the goal of over 10,000. So between the local community support, the local business support, they were able to get that 10,000 ticket threshold within 10 days, which is crazy to think about. Now, after all of that, they have to then submit all of that as an application in order to submit it to the NFL. They had 1 month to do this. Let's play a video from Tom Wade, who was in charge of that.
Tom Wade was tasked with putting together a detailed application.
We sincerely appreciate the league's serious consideration of Jacksonville for an NFL franchise.
In a short amount of time.
It was 1 month. There were nights that I slept on the floor and woke up and worked some more. It was around the clock.
You just don't call up the NFL and say, hey, we want a franchise. That may be the way it starts. It's about building the relationships, about them taking you seriously, about them vetting the city.
One of the major points was that the NFL was really formed in the days when the Rust Belt was healthier, and so the Southeast was 20% of the population and 10% of the team. So one of the reasons I think for having a team here is you're putting franchises in places where the people will be, not where they have been. My recollection is that we sent one of the interns in the office with the application to the airport on the plane to hand deliver it to the NFL. But it was finished the day it was due.
To think about. Now, there was also a couple of other components in that pitch, which was like a promo video for the city of Jacksonville itself, sort of marketing itself. And the voiceover for that video was done by James Earl Jones. I wish I could play it for you, but go watch that original sort of Destiny video and you can hear James Earl Jones. Yes, the voice of Darth Vader, the voice of Mufasa and Lion King. He's the narrator of that promo video. And he did this before he was Mufasa in Lion King. So I thought that was also an interesting note. So this is an entire package that's put together. It's submitted to the NFL, and then it comes down to voting. And so when the owners are getting together and they're voting, a lot of people think that Jacksonville and Charlotte were announced in the same year. And they were announced in the same year, but not at the same time, because after these ownership meetings, it was Charlotte that was only approved, and the rest of the teams were given an additional month. A lot of people think that this was a situation where the NFL was trying to give St. Louis an additional opportunity to sort of come to bat with a really good proposal. They never ended up doing that. And of course, Jacksonville was later awarded the franchise in a later month decision day. And I think we have enough time to play the announcement video, but I think it's really important. So let's play it.
This is a special edition of Eyewitness News.
Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Gianolis with Rob Sweeting. Jacksonville, are you sitting down?
We have just learned that Touchdown Jacksonville says that it has been confirmed that Jacksonville has become the 30th NFL franchise. Holy
We got it.
We need somebody to pinch us.
It's my pleasure to announce that the membership has selected Jacksonville as the 30th NFL club.
I just want to say, Commissioner, that the decision that the NFL made here today to Jacksonville is certainly going to make you proud.
And they definitely have made us all proud because after 27 years of being awarded the team, the Jaguars are finally getting their first player inducted into the Hall of Fame this weekend. Mr. Tony Baselli, left tackle for the Jaguars, very first ever draft pick ever in the team's history. So it's kind of all coming to fruition for the city of Jacksonville and the Jaguars, and being able to put this accomplishment, on the pedestal that it deserves, because it really is a story of getting the Jaguars, is the story of how the fan base and the players are today. It took determination. It took believing in the little guy. And it's really been an honor to sort of watch this all unfold. So I hope, as we have the closing seconds, I hope you guys all tune into the Hall of Fame game tonight and the ceremonies on Saturday. One last time, go Jags.